the woman who insulted a group of people without knowing they were psychopaths and ended up fighting for her life. The film begins with a young woman named Nancy driving her car along a quiet road. During her trip, she pulls over to the roadside because she needs to pee. Lately, Nancy has been feeling something strange with her body. She has a strong suspicion that she might be pregnant. Out of curiosity, she decides to use a pregnancy test to confirm her intuition. To her shock, the test result shows that she is indeed pregnant. Panicking, Nancy immediately rushes to meet her best friend, Tabs. She confides in Tabs about her unplanned pregnancy, admitting that she doesn't even remember who the father of her baby is. The only thing Nancy recalls is that she once made love with a man at a party she attended. Nancy is terrified at the thought of her father finding out about the pregnancy. Tabs advises her to consider terminating the pregnancy, reminding Nancy that she is still young and has a long life ahead of her. Becoming a mother at such a young age would be difficult, especially since Nancy is clearly not ready to take on that responsibility. However, Nancy hesitates and is not yet ready to make any decision regarding her unborn baby.
You're pregnant?
Yeah.
Did you tell your dad?
Ew.
In the middle of their conversation, Nancy excuses herself because she has to go to work. She currently works as a new manager at a restaurant called Fat Bottom Bistro, which was founded by her father, Edward Osborne. After years of helping her father with the business, Nancy has finally earned his trust to take on the role of manager. On her way to work, Nancy's car suddenly breaks down, forcing her to walk so she won't be late. Luckily, she runs into her coworker and close friend, Bobby. Nancy asks Bobby to give her a ride to the restaurant since she's already running behind schedule. Riding together on Bobby's bike, they hurry off to work. When they arrive, Edward scolds Nancy for being late. As a manager, Edward reminds her that she should be setting a good example for the other employees. Nancy tries to explain that her car broke down, but Edward insists that as a manager, she must take full responsibility for her punctuality. Realizing that Nancy's car really needs repair, Edward decides to have it serviced the next day so she can use it again soon. He then instructs Nancy to take the night shift, during which she will be accompanied by Jake Collins, one of the restaurant's longtime employees. However, Nancy feels uneasy about her father's decision. Although Jake is an experienced worker, she feels more comfortable working alongside Bobby, her close friend and regular partner at the restaurant. Nancy pleads with her father to let Bobby stay with her during the night shift, hoping his presence will make the long night easier. But Edward refuses, explaining that the restaurant doesn't need extra staff at night and hiring more workers would only increase operational costs. His rejection leaves Nancy disappointed and in a foul mood.
What? No. Dad, I can't. Can you at least let Bobby stay?
No, I've got plans.
After the conversation, Nancy tries to calm herself by cleaning up leftover food from the customers' tables. As she clears one of the plates, her eyes fall on a pile of peanuts, and suddenly she feels a wave of nausea hit her stomach. Nancy realizes this must be one of the symptoms of her pregnancy. Unable to hold it in, she rushes outside and starts vomiting. Outside, she runs into Jake, who is smoking and looks concerned as he sees Nancy getting sick.
It's bad meat. Just the fuck you eat, girl.
Jesus, Jake.
Nancy out here.
Not long after, Edward comes out of the restaurant looking cheerful and excited. He happily tells Nancy that he's going on a date with a woman. However, instead of feeling happy for him, Nancy becomes angry. Since her mother's recent death, Nancy feels that her father has moved on far too quickly, as if he has already forgotten their grief and replaced it with someone new.
I'll be right in.
Make sure.
You should wash that out with soap.
While Nancy is sitting and trying to relax, a group of 4 troublemakers suddenly shows up at the restaurant carrying the carcass of an animal. Knowing that they are notorious for causing trouble, Nancy immediately tells them to leave. Despite being told to go, it turns out that their intention was merely to buy some food. Even so, their presence only worsens Nancy's already bad mood. Her temper flares up and she starts yelling at everyone, including her employees. Among those who get scolded is Pete, Jake's younger brother, who gets reprimanded for not mopping the dirty floor. Seeing Nancy losing control makes Bobby nervous. Not wanting the situation to get worse, Bobby offers to handle the rowdy group and throw them out, but but Nancy refuses, insisting that she'll deal with them herself.
Bullshit. Oh, we're not the jerk offs.
Can you cut it out, assholes?
Jerk offs. Which is it? Are we jerk offs or assholes?
Feeling disrespected by the troublemakers, Nancy decides to call the police to have them removed. However, unbeknownst to them, she only pretends to make the call to scare them away. Her plan works. The group starts to panic, not wanting to get in trouble with the law, and reluctantly leaves the restaurant. Before leaving, the group's apparent leader glares at Nancy with hatred in his eyes and threatens that they'll come back for revenge.
I'll be back later.
After the incident, Nancy gathers all the employees in the kitchen. Bobby, Jake, Pete, Cooper, and another worker named John stand nervously, waiting for Nancy to speak. The atmosphere in the kitchen grows tense. Still emotionally unstable, Nancy unleashes her frustration on everyone. As a manager, she is supposed to be a role model, but this time she's completely lost control. No one dares to speak or protest, except Jake, the longtime employee who has worked there for years. Jake interrupts her and bluntly says that the only reason Nancy became a manager is because of her father, Edward, the restaurant's owner. According to him, if it weren't for family ties, Nancy would never have gotten the position. His words hit Nancy hard and make the atmosphere even more tense. Feeling deeply insulted and furious that Jake dared to challenge her in front of everyone, Nancy makes a sudden decision. She fires him on the spot. At first, Jake thinks she's joking or just venting her anger, but as he sees the seriousness in her eyes, he realizes that she truly means it.
Because I think I already did.
Except PD.
Sorry.
Shut up, Jake. You're fired.
Who?
Am I not the manager?
Yeah, because your dad owns the place.
Okay, that's it. I've had enough.
What are you gonna do?
After being fired, Nancy finds herself in a difficult situation. She no longer has a coworker to help her during the night shift. Even so, she convinces herself that she can handle everything alone. Nancy believes that night customers are fewer than those in the daytime, so managing the restaurant by herself shouldn't be too hard. Meanwhile, Jake waits in his car outside, feeling both sad and frustrated. Since he came to work with his younger brother Pete, he has no choice but to stay until Pete's shift ends in the late afternoon. As he sits there, Jake stares at the restaurant with a disappointed expression, watching Nancy busy cleaning up the animal carcass the troublemakers had brought in earlier.
Oh, God.
Time passes, and the workday finally comes to an end. Bobby, Pete, Cooper, and John get ready to go home. As night falls and the restaurant grows quiet, Nancy calls her father to inform him about firing Jake. Because of that decision, she is now left to manage the restaurant entirely on her own. Edward is initially shocked and can't believe his daughter has actually fired Jake. However, his attention seems more focused on his date that evening with another woman. Though slightly confused, Edward realizes that, as the owner, he must eventually deal with the issue and understand the reason behind Nancy's drastic action. Nancy reassures him that he doesn't need to worry. She insists she can handle everything by herself.
Maybe don't call it that.
Was that really necessary?
Yes. I fired Jake.
Yeah, you can handle that, right? You need to be there.
While sitting alone and trying to calm her mind, Nancy suddenly hears loud knocks on the door and windows. She freezes in shock when she notices several small motorcycles parked outside near the restaurant. Realizing that the group of troublemakers has returned, fear begins to consume her. Quickly, she locks both the front and back doors. Through the restaurant's speaker system, Nancy warns them to leave, threatening to call the police if they continue disturbing her. Instead of backing off, the group only becomes more aggressive, pounding on the doors and windows even harder. With no other choice, Nancy grabs the phone and actually calls the police this time. She explains that a group of 4 people is harassing and frightening her at her workplace. They keep banging on the doors and windows relentlessly, making her terrified. Although they haven't yet used physical violence, Nancy pleads for the police to come as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the officer on the other end gives her bad news. Some officers are currently occupied with other matters, so help might arrive later than expected. Still, the officer advises Nancy to stay on the line and keep talking until the police arrive. Suddenly, the call is cut off. Nancy quickly realizes that the group must have severed the restaurant's phone line. Alarmed, she rushes to look for her cell phone in her bag. But before she can find it, one of the masked troublemakers suddenly appears from behind the window, making her jump in terror. He's still outside, yet close enough to make it clear that they've surrounded the building, blocking both exits and trapping her inside. The restaurant's lights abruptly go out, plunging the entire place into darkness. Amid the eerie silence, Nancy notices something horrifying. The animal carcass she had thrown out earlier has somehow reappeared on one of the tables. Panicking, she dashes to her bag, desperately hoping to find her phone and call for help, only to discover that her phone has already been stolen. Before the situation can escalate further, the sound of police sirens echoes in the distance. The gang panics and quickly flees into the night. The police arrive just in time, and Nancy feels an overwhelming sense of relief as she sees one of the officers stepping out of the patrol car. She rushes to unlock the front door and lets him in. The officer, named Tom, approaches her calmly, trying to soothe her as she trembles in fear. He asks why the restaurant is in complete darkness. Nancy explains that the troublemakers had cut off the restaurant's power. Hearing this, Tom walks over to the main switch and attempts to turn the lights back on. Strangely, the lights flicker to life without any problem, as if nothing had happened at all. After making sure the electricity was working, Tom walked around the restaurant to check for any sign of the group Nancy had mentioned. However, after inspecting both inside and around the restaurant, he couldn't find any trace of them. There was no evidence that the group was still nearby. Only the animal carcass lying in the kitchen caught his attention.
They're scaring the shit out of me. Did you hear anything I just said?
Yeah, right.
Are you fucking serious?
Tom concluded that perhaps the people who had bothered Nancy were just a bunch of mischievous kids. Exhausted after a long day of handling various tasks, Tom decided to take a short break in the restaurant and ordered a cup of coffee. While Nancy was busy preparing it for him, Tom stepped outside again to patrol the area around the restaurant, wanting to make sure there were no lingering signs of the troublemakers who had scared Nancy earlier.
Hey there, this is Sheriff Brooks down at the Fat Bottom Bistro.
Seeing Tom act so casually and choosing to relax instead of actively searching for the gang made Nancy angry. She started describing their characteristics. They wore masks and rode small motorcycles. Hearing those details made Tom freeze in shock. The description Nancy gave matched perfectly with a wanted gang the police had been searching for. The group was responsible for several brutal murders of innocent people. Realizing how dangerous the situation really was, Tom quickly urged Nancy to get into his police car. But before they could leave, one of the masked gang members suddenly emerged from the darkness and viciously attacked Tom, leaving him helpless. Panicking, Nancy ran to hide inside a storage room nearby.
What's going on?
Go!
There, she discovered the small motorcycles the gang had hidden earlier. From her hiding spot, Nancy watched in horror as Tom was repeatedly beaten by one of the attackers. Just when she felt completely hopeless, Nancy heard footsteps approaching from outside the restaurant. Bobby had arrived, unaware of what was happening. At exactly the wrong moment, Nancy instantly panicked. She knew Bobby would be in grave danger if the gang saw him. Without thinking twice, she rushed toward him, grabbed his arm, and pulled him inside the restaurant as quickly as she could. Trembling and anxious, Nancy asked why Bobby was there so late at night. Confused by her panic, Bobby explained that he had been worried about her working alone and came to check on her, even though he knew he wouldn't be paid for it. Nancy quickly borrowed Bobby's phone to call her father and tell him that she was in danger, but Edward didn't answer. He was still busy on his date. Unexpectedly, the gang managed to get inside the restaurant because Nancy had forgotten to lock the door. With panic setting in, Nancy and Bobby searched frantically for a safe place to hide. Surrounded and with nowhere left to run, Bobby decided to sacrifice himself by drawing the gang's attention away from Nancy, telling her to contact someone for help. Nancy then remembered her best friend, Tabs, who was known for responding quickly to messages, especially in emergencies. When Tabs received a message from Bobby's phone in the middle of the night, she was confused, wondering why he was texting her at such an unusual hour. Nancy quickly replied, explaining that it was actually her using Bobby's phone and that she was in serious danger. She begged Tabs to come to the restaurant as fast as possible, but before she could finish sending a clear message, she heard approaching footsteps. Within seconds, one of the gang members found their hiding place. Captured and terrified, Nancy and Bobby could do nothing but pray that someone would come to save them. one of the masked attackers forced Nancy and Bobby to kiss each other. Unsatisfied, another one dragged Nancy into the kitchen with the cruel intent of torturing her further. Though terrified, Nancy tried to stay calm and think of a way to escape. When the man became slightly careless, she seized the opportunity to free her hands from the duct tape binding them. Once free, Nancy grabbed a nearby knife and stabbed the man's leg. As he screamed in pain, she used the moment to flee through the restaurant's back door. But as soon as she got outside, another attacker blocked her path. With no other choice, Nancy drove the knife into his stomach. When the man removed his mask, Nancy was stunned to see the face behind it. It was Pete. Moments later, 2 more masked men appeared and took off their masks, revealing themselves as Jake and Cooper. Nancy's mind spiraled into chaos. How could this be possible? The very people she had considered friends, even like family, were the ones who had been terrorizing her all night. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. These were the people closest to her in the restaurant, co-workers who had shared both good and bad times with her for years. Yet now, the very same people she trusted most had turned out to be the masterminds behind the terrifying night that nearly cost her life. Even worse, they had brutally murdered an innocent police officer without a shred of remorse.
What the fuck is going on?
But why? What had driven her co-workers to such madness? To understand, we go back to a few hours earlier, back to the moment when Nancy unleashed her anger on everyone in the restaurant. When Jake had dared to talk back to her in front of the others, Nancy had felt deeply humiliated. Already fed up with Jake's defiance, she made a snap decision to fire him. Although Jake had apologized for his behavior, Nancy stood by her choice. What's done is done. She didn't want to see Jake working in that restaurant ever again. After being fired, Jake sat in his car feeling broken and defeated as he waited for his younger brother, Pete, to finish his shift. Losing his job sent him into despair. He couldn't stop thinking about the bills piling up. Rent, insurance, everything. To make matters worse, Jake had long been dependent on illegal drugs to keep himself calm. And now, without a source of income, he had no idea how to afford them anymore. When all the employees finished their shifts, Jake decided to invite some of his coworkers to join him for a night of heavy drinking, hoping to drown his thoughts and numb his frustration.
You in, PD?
Are you in, Jake?
Yeah, I'm in, buddy. Grab that, PD. Sure, I believe
Jesus Christ, will you guys shut up?
At first, Bobby refused to join, but after persistent persuasion from Jake, he finally agreed to come along. Eventually, everyone went home, including Jake, who left with Pete. They planned to regroup later that night to continue the party. But instead of going home, Jake and Pete made a stop to buy more drugs, a routine they had both fallen into.
How's it hanging, Jake?
Give it to Petey.
You got the money?
On the way, Jake began using the drugs, and soon his mind started slipping out of control. Under the influence, Jake suddenly came up with a twisted idea to find the group of troublemakers who, in his mind, were responsible for getting him fired. He knew exactly where they usually hung out. Fueled by rage and drugs, he devised a cruel plan for revenge. Jake blamed the gang entirely for his firing, believing that their disturbance at the restaurant earlier had pushed Nancy to her breaking point, which led to his dismissal.
Biggest gateway drug there is.
You can't just fucking dump me like that. Petey, pull!
When they arrived at the gang's hideout, Jake distracted them by striking up a casual conversation. But when the opportunity came, he suddenly stabbed one of them with the knife he had been carrying.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah, funny to a mongoloid.
You're like, I lost my job.
Yet that wasn't his only weapon. Jake also had a gun hidden in his pocket, which made him even bolder. Without hesitation, Jake and Pete ruthlessly killed the entire group with disturbing ease.
Stand up. Dance, come on. Come on, you can dance.
If you're gonna shoot us, just shoot us! What are you doing?
Fuck you! Fuck!
After slaughtering the gang with their bare hands, Jake and Pete gathered all the small motorcycles and masks, stuffing them into their car before speeding toward the place where their co-workers were partying. Inside the car, a heated argument broke out between the two brothers. Pete couldn't believe what they had just done, murdering people who might have been innocent. Horrified, he pulled the car over, unable to keep driving. Guilt consumed him as he looked down at his blood-stained hands and face, the sight of it reminding him of the brutality they had just committed. Seeing Pete's trembling body covered in blood, Jake told him to get out of the car and clean himself up at a nearby restaurant before anyone noticed. While Pete went to wash, Jake continued on to meet Cooper and Bobby, who were still drinking and partying. When he arrived, Jake joined them and tried to act normal, pretending that nothing had happened. Soon after, Jake proposed a game he claimed to have gotten from the group of delinquents, using the small motorcycles and masks. Without revealing that he and Pete had murdered the gang, Jake had another dark plan in mind. He wanted to use the bikes and masks to scare Nancy as revenge for what he believed was an unfair dismissal. Cooper and Bobby, already drunk, immediately got excited and agreed to join in without question. Without wasting any time, the three of them, Jake, Cooper, and Bobby, headed to the restaurant, where they spotted Pete cleaning off the blood from his body. Making sure not to attract Nancy's attention, Jake, Cooper, and Bobby set up the small motorcycles around the restaurant, positioning them where Nancy would easily notice. This was the first step in their twisted plan to slowly terrorize her. But soon, that wasn't enough for Jake. The group began pounding on the doors and windows, creating loud, unsettling noises that sent Nancy into panic. When Nancy tried to call the police, Jake quickly reacted by cutting the restaurant's phone line. However, things started spiraling out of control. Nancy had already managed to contact the authorities. Their plan to simply scare her was now ruined, and in a panic, they hid the motorcycles and took cover nearby.
We got this. All right. Okay.
Then, in a sudden fit of rage and madness, Jake killed Officer Tom right in front of Nancy's eyes.
Go, go, go!
The scene shocked everyone, especially Bobby. Realizing that things had gone too far, Bobby wanted to stop the entire charade. He didn't want to get involved in something that would destroy his life. Seeing the terror in Nancy's eyes only strengthened his resolve to end it all. When Bobby arrived at the restaurant later on his bicycle, Nancy rushed toward him, her face filled with fear and desperation. She didn't want anything bad to happen to him, and without hesitation, she pulled him inside to protect him from the danger lurking outside. Meanwhile, Jake, Cooper, and Pete were left confused and furious by Bobby's actions. They couldn't understand why Bobby would choose to protect Nancy instead of following through with the plan they had already started. With their fingerprints scattered all over the scene, Jake realized there was no turning back. He glared at Cooper and Pete with a threatening look, forcing them to obey his every command. Jake ordered Cooper and Pete to go inside the restaurant and capture Nancy. When Nancy fought back and tried to escape, Pete blocked her way. Unaware that it was Pete behind the mask, Nancy instinctively stabbed him with the knife she was holding, causing him to collapse from severe bleeding. It wasn't until the mask fell off that Nancy's eyes widened in horror. She finally saw that the man she had just stabbed was Pete.
What the fuck did you guys do?
Alright, bud. I'm gonna get his leg, man.
Realizing that the people she once trusted were the ones behind all the terror, Nancy initially wanted to escape, but she quickly abandoned that thought. She knew their actions had gone too far, beyond forgiveness, and deep inside, a burning desire for revenge began to grow. While Jake, Cooper, and Bobby were tending to the gravely injured Pete inside the restaurant, Nancy quietly slipped in through the back door. By chance, she ran into Cooper in the kitchen. In a moment of panic, Nancy shoved him with all her strength, causing Cooper to stumble and fall into a pot of boiling oil. The scorching liquid splashed onto his face and hands, burning him severely and killing him almost instantly.
Hey, Bobby. How was she?
Meanwhile, Bobby was torn with guilt and confusion. He was struggling with what to do next. Part of him wanted to end it all, especially by killing Jake, the mastermind behind the nightmare that had cost so many lives. But before he could act, Jake turned on him and stabbed him to death without a second thought. After killing Bobby, Jake immediately began searching for Nancy, who had now become his only target. As Nancy hid, she stumbled upon Bobby's body, covered in blood. Barely conscious, Bobby handed her the keys to the police car, his final act of hope, urging her to escape while she still could. At that very moment, Tabs arrived at the restaurant, horrified by the chaos and destruction around her. Jake spotted both women but chose to chase Nancy, while Tabs, terrified and helpless, ran off to get help. A violent chase ensued between Nancy and Jake. When Nancy tried to escape through the back of the restaurant, Jake caught up to her and stabbed her in the back. Not stopping there, he dragged her back inside and plunged his knife into her stomach several more times, leaving her weak and bleeding on the floor. Believing she would soon die, Jake fled the restaurant, leaving behind the bodies of his friends and his chaos. Pete had already bled out and died. On his way home, Jake called the police, pretending to be an innocent witness reporting a murder at Fat Bottom Bistro.
I think my friend is dying.
Once he arrived home, Jake frantically began packing his belongings, planning to flee town before the police could catch him. But just as he was about to leave, the doorbell rang. When he went to check, no one was there. Before he could react, Nancy appeared behind him and drove a knife straight into his back, stabbing him repeatedly until he collapsed to the floor, bleeding out and dying on the spot. Miraculously, Nancy had survived Jake's earlier attack. She had hidden several pieces of raw meat under her clothes, which absorbed the blows and prevented the knife from piercing her vital organs. Her quick thinking and courage in such a desperate situation had saved her life. After finally killing Jake, Nancy stumbled away from his house, exhausted and covered in blood. The brutal fight had drained her strength, and she collapsed to the ground. Thankfully, her father, Edward, arrived just in time. He rushed to her side, holding her hand and urging her to stay strong, because help was on the way. Through weak breaths, Nancy told her father everything that had happened, including the truth she had kept hidden. The baby she was carrying was Bobby's. They had made love one night during a party, and she had recently discovered her pregnancy. Despite everything that had happened, Nancy felt grateful that her unborn child was still safe. And with that, the story comes to an end.